Most police officers begin their shift expecting the unexpected, a traffic stop that turns dangerous, a domestic dispute that escalates without warning, a call that seems routine until it suddenly isn't, but every now and then, a call comes through that is different from all the others. A call where there is no criminal to chase, no suspect to arrest, and no investigation to conduct. A call where the outcome will be decided not by hours of police work, but by a handful of seconds. For Officer Alexis Callaway of the Georgia State Patrol, one ordinary day became one of those moments. Somewhere nearby, a family was living through every parent's worst nightmare, and they had no idea whether help would arrive in time. Before the day was over, the life of a 1-month-old baby would depend entirely on what happened next. Across America, millions of parents tuck their children into bed every night believing tomorrow will be normal. That's the way life is supposed to work. We plan our days around routines: breakfast, work, school, family time, dinner. Most people assume that serious emergencies happen to someone else, somewhere else, on another day. That assumption disappeared in an instant for one Georgia family when their infant suddenly began choking. What started as a normal day immediately became a desperate race against time. Panic filled the room as the parents realized their baby was struggling to breathe. Every second seemed longer than the last. Fear took over. Rational thought became difficult. The only thing that mattered was finding help before it was too late. And as they reached for the phone and called 911, one terrifying question remained unanswered. Would anyone get there fast enough? Emergency dispatchers are trained to remain calm during chaos. They hear fear every day. But there are certain calls that immediately raise the stakes. A call involving a newborn infant is one of them. As information began coming in, it became clear that this was not a minor incident. The baby was only 1 month old. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Responders were dispatched immediately, but everyone involved understood the reality of the situation. Infants are incredibly fragile. Their airways are tiny. When breathing becomes compromised, there is very little time available to correct the problem. The clock was already ticking. Every passing moment increased the risk. Somewhere between dispatch and arrival, an invisible race had begun. The question was simple. Could help beat the clock? Officer Alexis Callaway happened to be the closest responder. Like countless officers across the United States, she had started her day expecting to handle whatever came her way. Police officers train for uncertainty because uncertainty is part of the job. But no amount of training changes the emotional weight of hearing that a child is in danger. As she accelerated toward the location, she knew only the basics. A baby needed help. A family was in distress. Every second mattered. The roads ahead suddenly became more than roads. They became the distance between a family and hope. Every intersection, every turn, and every passing minute carried enormous significance. Yet, there was one thing Officer Callaway could not know while driving toward the scene. Was she racing toward a rescue, or toward a tragedy that had already unfolded? Inside the home, the atmosphere was becoming more desperate by the second. The parents could do little more than hold on to hope while waiting for help to arrive. Anyone who has ever cared for a newborn understands the feeling of responsibility that comes with it. A child that's small depends entirely on the people around them. Parents spend countless hours protecting, feeding, comforting, and watching over their babies. But emergencies have a cruel way of making people feel powerless. The family was doing everything they could, yet the situation continued to spiral. Every glance at their infant made the fear worse. Every second without improvement felt unbearable. Somewhere outside, help was getting closer. But would it arrive before those precious seconds disappeared forever? When Officer Callaway arrived, the urgency of the situation became immediately clear. There was no time for introductions, no time for explanations, no time to slowly assess the environment. The baby was placed into her hands almost immediately. Imagine that responsibility. A child, barely a month old, terrified parents watching every movement. A situation that could change forever depending on what happened in the next few moments. This is the side of policing that rarely makes national headlines. Most people associate law enforcement with crime prevention, traffic enforcement, and public safety, but officers are often the first people to arrive during medical emergencies, fires, accidents, and life-threatening situations. In communities across America, police officers are frequently called upon to do far more than enforce laws. In this moment, Officer Callaway wasn't investigating a crime. She was standing between a family and unimaginable heartbreak. Training exists for moments like this, not because officers expect them every day, but because when they happen, failure is not an option. Officer Callaway quickly assessed the infant and recognized the severity of the situation. The baby's airway was obstructed, breathing was compromised. Oxygen deprivation is unforgiving, especially for someone so small. Drawing on her training, she immediately began performing the procedures designed to help choking infants. Every movement had to be precise, every action had to be deliberate. There was no room for panic, no room for hesitation. While fear filled the room around her, she remained focused on the task in front of her. Yet even with training, experience, and determination, one difficult question still remained. Would it be enough? The next few moments felt much longer than they actually were. For the parents, time seemed to slow to a crawl. Every second carried enormous weight. Every movement was watched with desperate hope. Across the country, stories like this play out every day. First responders stepping into situations where lives hang in the balance. Men and women who must remain calm while everyone around them is falling apart. It's one of the least visible aspects of public service. The headlines often focus on dramatic pursuits and major crimes, but countless acts of heroism happen quietly behind closed doors, witnessed only by the families whose lives are forever changed. Officer Callaway continued working, focused entirely on the infant in front of her. The outcome remained uncertain. The tension remained unbearable, and still, the clock kept moving. One of the defining characteristics of great first responders is the ability to function under pressure. Most people freeze when confronted with chaos. It's a natural, human response. But professionals learn to push through fear and continue acting when action is required. Across American history, communities have relied on individuals willing to step forward during moments of crisis. Firefighters running into burning buildings, paramedics rushing toward disaster scenes, police officers answering calls that nobody else wants to answer. It is a tradition built on service and responsibility. In that small Georgia home, Officer Callaway was continuing that tradition. She was doing what countless public servants have done before her, standing firm while others needed someone to depend on. But the outcome still hung in the balance. The room remained silent except for the sounds of urgency and anticipation. Family members watched helplessly. Hope and fear existed side by side. The baby still needed air. The emergency was not over. For Officer Callaway, the mission remained the same. Stay focused. Trust the training. Keep working. These moments reveal something important about character. Heroism rarely looks the way Hollywood portrays it. It is usually quieter, less dramatic, more personal. It happens when someone chooses responsibility over fear and action over hesitation. Yet even heroes cannot control outcomes. They can only give everything they have. And at that moment, nobody knew whether everything would be enough. Then, finally, something changed. The infant responded. A breath. Then another. The airway cleared and the baby began breathing again. In an instant, the atmosphere inside the home transformed. The fear that had dominated every second suddenly gave way to relief. The nightmare that had seemed moments away became a story of survival. The parents watched as their child began breathing once more, and the weight that had been crushing them started to lift. Medical personnel arrived shortly afterward and continued treatment, but the most critical battle had already been won. A 1-month-old baby was alive because one officer arrived in time and remained calm when every second mattered. Stories like this rarely become national news. There are no dramatic car chases, no major investigations, no viral headlines seen around the world. But perhaps these are the stories that matter most. They remind us what public service truly means. They remind us that behind every badge is a human being who may one day be called upon to make the difference between life and death. Somewhere in Georgia today, a child is alive because Officer Alexis Callaway answered a call. Somewhere in America tonight, another officer is putting on a uniform, preparing to serve a community that may never fully understand the sacrifices being made on its behalf. That's the quiet heroism that helps keep communities strong. That's the kind of service that earns respect. And that's why stories like this deserve to be remembered.